Okay, so let us make a start. Thank you for joining us. My name's Claire Drury and I'm part of the Work Happy team. And at Work Happy, we believe that life is too short to be unhappy at work. And that's why we thought in these times that are just quite surreal, huge amounts of enforced change going on, working lives changing unrecognisably, every part of life changing. We just thought we would reach out and offer some free tools, some hints and tips that might help get through this very strange time. Now, this is a 45-minute session, so I'm working on the principle of simple things done well. I want to be able to do enough to prompt your thinking, to give you a few tools, hints, tips, and some links to other things that you can do, with the idea of doing one thing differently at the end of it. And I'll come back to that because I'd love to know if there's anything that's triggered some thoughts for you about what you might do differently as a result of this. Just a little bit of Zoom etiquette. I'm sure you're all completely comfortable with using Zoom now. It seems to be your way of life. But if you could keep yourselves on mute throughout the session, that would be great. But I'm really happy for you to use the chat function. Please do make any comments, ask questions, add anything if you want to. That's all absolutely fine, and I'll keep an eye on that. I've got some support as well. My colleague Dan will be keeping an eye on that window. So equally, if you've got any technical problems, then Dan can help you out as well. Now, we are going to record the session. I know that if you've been on the others, they'll have been recorded as well. The reason we're doing that is so that we can share them with you afterwards, and also we can send a recording on to people who signed up but weren't able to make it. So, I'd love to get started. The subject of regaining your mojo. I'm sure Rob has covered this on the previous webinars, or I know he has, but I just wanted to put it into a little bit of context. When the team were talking about what subjects to offer for these webinars, our colleague in marketing, Emma, who's extremely sociable, talks to lots and lots of people, had noticed a real trend with people actually saying, yes, we've got more time at home, we've got time with family, we're getting more sleep than we've ever had before, and in most cases we're all eating more than we've ever had before. But she noticed that everybody was saying they kind of lost their get up and go, their mojo, as many people were calling it, and they're just drained of energy, which kind of doesn't figure until you look at why. Now, some of the reasons behind that is isolation is tough. If you're living on your own, particularly, it's really tough. But even when you're living with your family, a different set of people than you would spend that amount of time with, it can be really draining. And to be honest, Zoom calls, however good the technology is, it's no replacement for human contact. We've also had to adapt to different routines. We've had none of our light relief, such as kind of going to the gym, going in for a drink with a friend, just having a damn good natter and offloading everything with somebody that you wouldn't. The tone of meetings, phone calls and stuff is just slightly different. It doesn't do the same thing. So people are losing energy. They're losing that get up and go. But we need to really dive into what losing our mojo means. Now, I've used the word energy a couple of times, and that's what this is all about. There are different types of energy, hence splitting this up into three different webinars. So I'm going one extra. And what we want to do is to inspire and prompt you so that you can re-energize and help you to come up with some positive changes. So the reason I said 4 earlier is there are 4 different types of energy, and I'll explain why we've only got 3 webinars. Firstly, we've got your emotional energy, so how you feel, how you recognize the emotions that are positive for you and how you fuel those. That was the first in this 3-part set of webinars. You've also got your mental energy, which is about enabling you to focus, really focus and think clearly, even when there's so many changes and lots going on, that kind of takes up that space. That one was a couple of weeks ago, excuse me. And this one, part 3, is about your spirit energy, or finding your purpose, as we're calling it. And this completes the set. The other energy is physical energy. This is about getting enough exercise, a good diet, sleep, all of those things. Now, we're not experts in that at all, and there is a huge amount out there on the internet about that. So hence only having 3 webinars, because to be honest, we're looking up stuff like that ourselves as well. So let's get into this spirit energy. How I'm going to take you through the session is we're going to start off by looking at what it is. Defining it is interesting because there are so many different interpretations of the word spirit, and actually there's some different opinions about that word as well. We need to look at why it's so important. At the same time as that, because I'm looking at a few case studies, we'll look at introducing you to some tools that will help you find your spirit energy. And finally, as I've already mentioned, this is about doing one thing differently. Getting a snippet that means actually it makes you think differently. It makes you think, okay, how can I improve moving forwards? So that's our setup for this morning. I am going to start you with a really big, challenging question though. Let me show you that. What's your reason for being? Now, this isn't going to be all about navel gazing. That is a huge question, and it's a really tough question. And the reason I put it in is Dan, my colleague, who is doing the technical support today, was talking to me about it and said that he was working with somebody who's got a massive amount of experience, hugely respected, written books and everything, and just suddenly turned to him one day in the middle of a chat and said, Dan, what's your reason for being? And if somebody asks you that question, you don't really think about it beforehand, but it's so difficult to answer, mainly because many of us don't even think about it until we're challenged with it. But equally, it's significant. It's quite a deep question. Just to put this into context a little bit, you won't be able to answer that by the end of it, or if you are, you've probably done a fair amount of thinking before you get to this session. But what you will do is have a route to thinking about how you might go about finding out the answer to that question for you. So let's start with what spirit energy actually is. Now, if at this point you actually want to write in the chat window what you think spirit energy is, then I'm more than happy to take any extra input that you want. But I've come up with a few words that kind of harness what we talk about when we're talking about spirit energy. So spirit energy is about your reason for being, hence that big question I asked you. It's about a sense of purpose, and it's striving for that sense of purpose. Your spirit and energy is about your need for meaning and being fulfilled. And one of the ones that I particularly like in the middle there is why you're doing what you're doing when you feel best about yourself. So this is about what drives you, what makes you feel good about yourself, really about being true to your values. And there's something in there about your moral compass as well, about acting with integrity and being really authentic for you. So as you can see from that, it's actually not an easy thing to articulate, to kind of just put into a little snippet or a few words. So the best thing to do is to explore a few examples. The first example I've got is a really good friend of mine. Now, I have known this lady for over 15 years, and she's in a lovely situation that a lot of us actually like. She's a very intelligent lady. She had a career in media. She was a photo editor for a very well-known magazine. She's married with 2 children. She's got a beautiful home. Her husband has a very good job, and they do not want for anything. They have plenty of whatever they need. When her 2 boys were very young, they had a lot of help. They had a live-in nanny, and she was awesome. She was amazing. She did pretty much everything. So she would feed the kids, clothe the kids, do the washing, do the ironing, take the kids to school. And if you're anything like me, it's just like, oh God, that sounds amazing. But the thing that really surprised me, and it was a while ago now, but it always sticks with me, is her really struggling. She really, really had a tough time and went through all sorts. because it turned out in the end she'd actually lost her sense of purpose. She'd given up her work because she didn't need to work on paper, she didn't need to work, so she'd given up her career. Her kids, she was a wonderful mum, genuinely, still is, but her job wasn't looking after the kids because there was a nanny employed. And there was nothing else there. So she genuinely had lost her sense of purpose and didn't really know what her reason for being was. And it was an amazingly tough time for her. Since then, she's worked all of this out. She does lots for charity. The children are older, so they don't have the live-in help anymore. And it's just really helped to regain that balance and be true to her values, because caring about other people, doing things for other people is something that's really important to her. But it was a really strong message for me. Now, some people ask, is spirit around religion? And there is a simple answer for me on that, and it's no. But it depends if religion is inextricably linked to you being you. So it absolutely can be, but it doesn't have to. So the message out of this is it's different for everybody. It depends what makes you tick. It depends what your values are, what's really, really important for you, and what makes you the person that you are. Now, of course, we can try and find our sense of fulfillment in different ways, and work is often one of them. Some people work for charities, for example, and that really does help fulfill their sense of purpose about doing things for the greater good, doing things for other people, giving something back. That can be brilliant. But even people in these types of job can find that they lose that sense of purpose, or there's a mismatch if, for example, the integrity of the company itself is called into question, if something as simple as resources aren't being used as efficiently as they are, and the person on the receiving end isn't getting the full benefit. So there are lots of things that mean you can tip your balance, and until you look at what you feel that your sense of purpose actually is, what your reason for being is, it's very difficult to actually match that up. So you've got to do a little bit of thinking, a little bit of reflection to work out, and I've got some tools for you to help you do that. So whatever your role, your profession, the type of organisation you work for, one thing that we need to realise is the current pandemic, the situation that we've been forced into, has given a lot of people time to think, to maybe go through some changes, go from being really busy all of the time with work, being out of the house, being on the phone all the time, to gradually coming around to going through lots of changes, lots of difficult changes, to spending time with family that they wouldn't normally do, much more time and quality time and time playing and being and talking and all of those things, and actually realizing they were missing it before. So it's brought up a lot of questions for people, which is another reason why people may have lost their mojo. So asking yourself questions like, do I love what I do? Am I happy in my career? And do I feel fulfilled by my work? These sometimes feel impossible to answer, and they can be exhausting to think about. Now, just before we get on to how you can think about those, how you can structure it to get to some useful answers, I did a bit of research and found some quotes just to help crystallize this for you. Now, the first one of these is from a lady called Martha Beck. She's actually an author who has some best-selling books around this type of subject. She's a life coach. Her whole work is about helping people find their purpose. So she seemed an obvious person to go for. And as you can see where I've underlined the bit that stood out for me, she describes this as trusting your internal navigation system. For me, a really nice way of putting it. Now, I realise that not everybody thinks like me, so I also found another quote that I was quite surprised I found a quote by this person around this subject, but it is more logical and it's straightforward. And this is Steve Jobs. And he talks about connecting the dots, so something quite physical and quite visual. But he puts it in a lovely way that if you can't connect the dots looking forwards. You can't think, okay, let's look forward, let's just look forwards. You can only connect them looking backwards. You have to do a bit of reflection and understanding of yourself to be able to come to a conclusion about which dots are important so that you can use them moving forward. And my cheesy moment for the webinar, you can't talk about something like this without having something by someone like Oprah Winfrey. I should have been a bit more spiritual, I guess, but the bit in this that really stood out for me was her description of it's how you become most truly alive. And I love that. It's you and your best self. It's so many different things, but I think those three from different perspectives kind of sum it up for me. So the next, if I can move the slides on, the next question then is, why is this so important? Why is it so impactful in our lives? And the simple answer, and one that's very close to our hearts at Work Happy, is that it makes people happy if you get it right. It's what makes us tick. It's what makes us feel fulfilled. But it can also have a significant impact on our health, both mental and physical, and genuinely how productive we are at work. Which obviously is a good thing as well, because in turn, if we feel like we're delivering at work, that can make us feel good. So it's just all linked up. But it doesn't really tell you why or how it does all of those things. So I'm going to take you through a few examples. Now, the first example I'm going to introduce you to is something called the Energy Project, which was first started in 2006 in the States. You can still look this up, it's still going, it's still extremely successful, which is one of the reasons I've picked up on the example. It's not static, it's still returning results. And what this energy project did was it took some 100 employees, just over 100 employees from 12 different regional banks in New York and took them through a development program. And it was set up specifically to build and sustain the participants' energy, to get more done in less time, with more engagement and more sustainability. Everything that everybody strives for in their work, of course. So it took them through 4 modules that align exactly to those 4 energies. You've got the physical energy, the emotional energy, the mental energy, and the spirit energy. And it really helps them get to grips with what it is that really fuels them, what gives them that energy boost. Now, to make sure that the value of the project was really, really clear, they actually measured the output, the performance of these participants that they took through this program against their colleagues in the same 12 banks. And the results that they got were amazing. They were consistently around 20% outperforming their colleagues year on year on year, and they're still getting those sorts of results. So they know it works. And what the program was about resetting their rituals, understanding what makes them tick, understanding the behaviors that they use to drive that, and getting them to create some really good habits around using those different behaviors. And it's worked. It's been really, really successful. What they did do, though, was make sure that the spirit energy module was last, because the spirit energy one is the most difficult one to get your head round. And most people didn't even consider it as a source of energy until they started asking questions of themselves and looking more reflectively at what drives them forwards. So when it came to this final source of energy, the human spirit, clarity was sought on priorities and the rituals that we need to sustain them. So I'm going to tell you how just now. If I can move my slide on. I apologize. Right, there we go. So what they did was come up with 3 different categories that they were focusing their participants on. The first one was doing what you do best and enjoy most at work. So it's important to pick up on both of those things. And it's important to say that they're not mutually exclusive. And I'll tell you why in just a second. The second category was about spending time and energy on the areas you deem most important. And the final one was living your core values in a way that you behave day to day. So firstly, doing what you do best and enjoy the most at work. So I said they're not mutually exclusive. I'm taking myself as an example. I love to create visually engaging things. I love to create a room that feels visually engaging and comfortable. I love doing different types of art and craft and all that sort of thing. What I lack, though, is a natural attention to detail. So I will get to a certain stage and I will cut corners, very pragmatic. I will lose interest when it comes to the details, and I will look at it and think, brilliant, that's done. And some of those finite details may not be good. So it can't be considered for me something that I do best. I enjoy it, absolutely, but I'm never going to make a career out of it. So it's so important to have both of those questions answered. If you want to find what you do best and enjoy most at work, the best way to do it is to identify at least 2 experiences that you've had over the last few months, say 4 to 6 months, in this situation maybe up to 12 months, because we've been in a very weird time for the last 3. And what you're looking for are these experiences as when you are absolutely been flowing, you've been nailing it, you've been doing brilliantly and enjoying it at the same time. The Energy Project calls it when you've actually achieved the sweet spot. So when you've been effective, you've delivered great results, you felt effortlessly absorbed, inspired and fulfilled. The key is, once you've got those examples, it says at least 2. If you use 1, it's often skewed. So 2 or 3 examples, you then need to understand, get under the surface and work out exactly what it is about those situations that's made you really enjoy them and that you are doing best, because you can't just take it at face value. So for some people, it might be the actual work itself, the type of work that you're doing. For other people, it might be your interactions with people, how you lead, how you inspire, how you develop people. For some people, it's competing, it's winning, it's being the best. And others, it might be about creating. It can be any number of things. But do some homework on it, do some thinking, work ideally with somebody that you really trust, who knows you well, to really question you and push you. You can get some great stuff out of this. And of course, it's different for everybody. So that's about identifying what you do best and enjoy most at work. The second one is spending time on energy on the areas that you deem most important. And this can be any areas of life, such as work, family, service to others, whatever it is. Now, it takes some reflection and can be done with activities such as card sorts, questionnaires. There's all sorts out there on the internet. There's people like me that have got resources like that, tons of us, hundreds of us on the internet. And this time in lockdown may have well given you some thinking time to try and work out what is really important. Of course, it is about creating habits on the back of that. And the easiest way I've got to explain this is from an example, a work example from quite a long time ago, but when I first got into learning and development. And I was working for a company who decided to proactively create a culture of self-managed learning. And it was life-changing for me. It really engaged me in this subject, and I've been doing it ever since. But the real example was I was working with the finance director for this company at the time, and he was everything you would expect a finance director to be. Very detailed focused, very conscientious, quite straight-laced, lovely guy, quite quiet, but hugely dedicated to his work, would work late, would make sure he delivered whatever. And those behaviours were expected almost of him, because that's what he became to be known for. So he worked extremely hard and he delivered brilliant results. And through a lot of exploring what's important to him, he actually worked out that the balance was wrong. And what he wanted to do that was most important was spend more time with his son, his young son at home. And the reason this stood out for me was, once we'd gone through all of this process, we'd worked out that family and his son was just so important to him, and he needed to change the balance a little bit. Trying to change the habits was difficult, because so many people wanted things from him at work and he felt that he should be delivering. So what he actually came up with was having his son do the measurement of how successful he was at spending more time with him. And he did a little reward chart for his dad. It was on the fridge at home, and it measured things like time that he got home, time he spent playing, that he was really present, so not on his phone, days out that they had, activities that they were doing, and the real driver for him, the thing that was important, was his son. So the fact that his son was ticking him off and sometimes putting crosses in those boxes was the bit that really drove him to change his habits, and he genuinely did. So the final area is living your core values in a way you behave day to day. And this is something, again, that we may be of reflecting on. And it's a term that's used all the time. What are your values? What it is that drives you? Again, there's loads of readily available activities there, but one fun way that you can do this that I really enjoy is by considering what you find most annoying or upsetting in other people. You can have some fun with this. Make sure, again, that you're doing it with someone that you trust if you want to reflect externally as opposed to just on your own. And it can often reveal that the opposite of these behaviours are values for you. So I'm going to take my husband, for example. There is something that he absolutely hates, and that's lying. Even if it's small white lies, even if it's lies to try and make people feel better, being straightforward, being honest, being really upfront is really, really valuable for him. And he gets quite riled up about the fact if people lie. So by looking at that, we're able to come to the conclusion that honesty is a real value for him, and he's able to create habits that mean he's always honest. And the important thing for him is that he's always able to hold himself to account as well. So he's able to choose to move away from a situation if he thinks that that might be somebody telling a few white lies, or actually challenge other people about it as well. So to actually keep his integrity around that value present the whole time. So by exploring all three of these categories that we've got on the screen, you can get a deeper understanding of what makes up your spirit energy even, and then creating some great habits around them. So as I said, the energy project's still going. There's a book out there, The Way We're Working Isn't Working, and that's by the founder and the CEO of the energy project, Tony Schwartz. Now, another model that I'm going to show you that is in this same book and is really useful is around identifying your values. And it's a simple 4-box grid. You can draw this on a piece of paper, and the top of the box is about your behavior, or how you externalize what you do, and the bottom is about your intention, so what goes on inside you when you're behaving. And then on the right hand side we've got best, and the left hand side we've got worst, so best versions and worst versions. And similarly to how you used this before, what they recommend is that you recall at least 2 examples of when you felt good about yourself, when you felt really good about yourself. And you start thinking about what it is, what you've done, what you've said, so what behaviour you've used that made you feel good. You can then use this to clarify what the values are that you're serving in these situations. You can then look at the opposite side and do exactly the same. Examples of when I didn't feel good about myself. And it's important here to remember that when you get down to the bottom, when you've looked at the behaviours, what you've done, what you've said that makes you not feel good about yourself, that you're still looking at what values these are serving. So let me give you an example on this. Maybe you're chatting to a group of people that you work with. It may be on Zoom, it might be face-to-face if you remember that. And that group of people started gossiping about somebody that wasn't there and being a little unkind about them. Now, if we look at the right-hand side, your behaviour may have been to say that you don't want to be involved in a conversation like that, you don't think it's right that they're talking about this person behind their back, and that you chose to leave the conversation. Maybe you even followed up with the person that started it later and just had a really constructive chat that ended well, pointing out that that wasn't a great thing to do. And you ended up feeling good about yourself. The values that you might have been serving there might have been around consideration, about fairness, about kindness. There's no right answer to this. You have to work this bit out for yourself. But those are fairly understandable values to be serving in that situation. Now, if we use exactly the same example, and when you joined this conversation, the first thing you said to them, oh yeah, and another thing, did you know that they ... it's a very different situation, and you may end up not feeling good about yourself. Some of the values that may have been serving there are, for example, unkindness or selfishness. And a double check that you can do on this is that the bottom two boxes actually are the opposites. You can see that blue arrow there. So behavior that you use in the top right hand box is value adding once you've worked out what it is, and these are values driven intentions that you've got in the yellow box. If you look at the green box in the top left, these behaviors are value depleting, and they are value free, the intentions that you've got there. So they're not playing to your values, and you would expect the opposite ones in those bottom two boxes. So when we're talking about resetting your behavior, it's understanding and making situations to consciously use the behaviors that are value adding, and to really think about doing things that align with the values you've identified in that yellow box at the bottom there. Okay, so a final model to look at, just another tool that you can use. Let's double check for time. Good, we're good for time. So this is a really simple tool that you can use to try and refocus on your purpose and regain your energy. And it's about drawing this very simple grid. And down in the left-hand column, you need 4 columns in total. In the left-hand column there, you've got a list of the dimensions that you believe create a well-rounded and a well-lived life. Now, there are some suggestions there. There are no right or wrong answers here, but the one tip I would have for you is make sure there is a real range of activities there. Don't think about evaluating them at this point, but get a really good range. Most people have work, there's finance involved, family, what they do for themselves, so creativity, fitness and health comes in there, all sorts of things. So get a really good rounded range of things in that, dimensions in that first column. Once you've done that, the next column, column 2, is about how important that is in your life. So forget about the current situation and just think, how important is that for me? And what you need to do is use a 1 to 10 scale. How that calibrates for you is up to you. Once you've gone down, what I tend to do is go down and do my gut feel first, because that tends to be how I work, and then I'll do a final check, take a step back, make sure it actually makes sense. But it's about putting a number on it from that 1 to 10 scale. How important are each of those elements to you? The third column is the really, really difficult one. And again, I've said it so many times through this. Very often, if you work on these things with someone who knows you really well, who can challenge you without it causing an argument, without you feeling too defensive, and that you won't damage the relationship at all. How much energy do you currently put into that particular element of your life? And be honest. How much does it take up? How much of your energy does it sap? And we've got the scale of 1 to 10 again. And this is about being really honest with yourself. What is it that takes up your energy? And it doesn't necessarily need to be time. Think of those 4 types of energy. Does it take up your physical energy, your emotional energy, your spirit, your thinking, your mental energy? I nearly forgot one then. And your spirit energy as well. Once you've got those columns 2 and 3 filled out, all you've got to do is subtract one from the other, and you get a gap, as you can see at the end. And this just rings true for me hugely. A lot of people that we talk to when we're coaching, when we're working on developing leaders, all sorts of things, people are very good at saying, yes, that's really important to me. I need to do that. And what they do and what they say just don't match up. And the advice is that if you've got a gap of 2 or more, it's really worth thinking about making some changes in your life, making some new habits that mean the things that are important to you get more of your energy, whether it's the physical, emotional, mental or spirit energy, or all 4. A gap of 3 or more, and actually that's pretty significant. And you can see there, I've talked about my creativity. I think I've got a hidden artist in me somewhere, if you saw some of the things I did, you might not agree. But actually, I love it. I really enjoy it, but I don't pay enough attention to it. So I've got a gap of 4. I should do a little bit more of that to really keep my energy going and to help me regain my mojo, which is what this is all about. So just before I get to talk to you about what you might do differently, because this again, remember, is what it's about. Any of these tools you can take away, anything that I've said that might prompt you to have a different conversation or reflect on a different things, I'd love to hear about at the end. But I've got one more thing to talk to you about. And this is a fabulous Harvard Business Review article from 2010. And it's called How Will You Measure Your Life? It's written by a guy called Clayton M. Christensen. And he lectures at Harvard, and he challenges his business school students, to ask themselves 3 really insightful questions. And these are: how can I be sure that I'll be happy in my career? How can I be sure that my relationship with my family proves to be an enduring source of happiness? And how can I be sure that I will stay out of jail? Which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute. He's put these together just purely because, reflecting on life, he's seen that people get themselves into situations because and there's no plan to get themselves in these difficult situations, to be bored in your career and to get something that you just go into. A colleague of mine talks to somebody about who's had a life in one firm and is just working towards their retirement. They come in, they don't want to be happy, they don't want to be fulfilled, they just want to get it over and done with. That's not happiness in my career. If I can possibly avoid that, I will. It's also about observing that people end up divorced, about not speaking to their kids, about family rifts, all sorts of things. And of course, no one goes out with a plan to end up in that situation. And this, how can I be sure I will stay out of jail, makes it sound like it's said in jest, but it's really not. Someone that he went through university with was part of the Enron scandal and ended up in jail. And that was because of one bad decision. And just this once type of mentality, oh, okay, I'll bend the rules here. Obviously, it depends on the job you're in, the situation you're in, but it can land you in a difficult situation. Not necessarily jail, but it's really worth considering how you keep yourself and your integrity intact. What it actually does is it gets people to think about purposefully creating a culture for yourself, creating a real strategy for your life, so a plan. And it's about understanding that you've got limited resources. You can't do everything. We're all shattered a lot of the time because there's so much going on. So how you share your resources amongst all the things that you do is really important. If there is a finite number of resources, work out what's important and where you should be putting your energy. It's about avoiding the cost of a marginal mistake, which is about that staying out of jail bit that I was talking to you about. And it's also about choosing the right yardstick. How do you measure your life? What is it that you want to measure against? And is it consistent as well? If it's changing every year, then it's very difficult to actually move forward. And finally, one of the things that surprised him that he discovered when he was answering these questions for himself is doing deals, doing business doesn't get the deep rewards that come from building up people. So it's not about the level of individual prominence that tends to be important. It's about the individuals you've helped to become better people. And that can really serve a lot of values in a lot of people. So we are on to the final bit about doing one thing differently. Whilst you're thinking about that, and I would like, if you feel comfortable sharing in the chat window, if there's one thing you might take away from this, I'd love to hear about it. But just a couple of pointers for you as well. This was possibly the most difficult webinar for me to put together because there's so much that we could do. So just a couple of other mentions. There is a guy called Simon Sinek who is quite prominent on the internet. He's written lots of books, a leadership guru, I guess, a thought leader. And he has got a fabulous book called Start With Why. And there are some great there's a brilliant TED talk, a very famous TED talk that he did, and also lots and lots of snippets on YouTube that really help him understand something that he calls the golden circles. It's about the fact that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So this comes back to your energy, your reason for being. It's really important. If you can identify it and get it right, you can achieve so much more. So if you want to inspire others, always communicate your why first. If you're excited, if you want to excite and motivate individuals, your best resource for any business is people that have actually identified this spirit energy. And authenticity is a really important thing. Once you've discovered it, playing to that strength is huge, because you just don't need all of these false marketing headlines and statistics that have been adapted to show one thing or another. Once you've worked out what makes you tick, use it, because it can be really powerful. There's also another book called Drive by Daniel Pink. Again, available on TED, really entertaining TED Talks, and also on YouTube. There's a great animated version on YouTube of this as well. And this is about what really motivates people. And it talks about 3 things that are so important: somebody's autonomy, their mastery, and their purpose. And their purpose is the thing that we've been thinking about. But there's some great examples in that TED Talk there that are really, really useful. Finally, there's almost the godfather of all of this is a guy called Viktor Frankl. Now, he was a professor of neurology and psychiatry, and he describes the incredible journey of survival through the concentration camps, including Auschwitz. And he wrote a book on the back of that called Man's Search for Meaning. And it's a very inspiring read if you want to go one step further with that as well. So that's everything that I wanted to share with you today. I really hope there's something in there that you have got from it. As I said, if you've got anything that you want to add in the chat window, would love to hear it. But if not, I wish you all the very best of luck with finding your spirit energy, using some of these tools hopefully I've introduced you to today. We will be sending out a recording of the webinar after we finish them. We've got another one going this afternoon. But if you would like copies of the first 2, if you haven't had them, then please just let us know, and we'd be very happy to share those as well. So for now, really think about playing to your strengths, thinking about what makes you tick, your emotions, your mental energy, and your spirit energy, and all the best of luck for the rest of this pandemic, this strange situation that we're in, and we hope to connect with you sometime again in the future. Thank you very much.